This is Darren Wilson in 7HQR, and this is a review chapter on basic message handling for auxiliary communicators. In this chapter, I'll be covering tactical versus formal messaging, basic messaging procedures, messaging pro words and phrases, and finally using the ACS 213 general message form for radio messaging. Tactical messaging is generally short messages done in real time and often urgent. Messages such as, the boat is sinking, the building is collapsing, we need medical assistance immediately. These types of messages are tactical messages. They are unstructured and informal. They are always logged during an incident in the communications center, but not in the detail that an ACS 213 uses. And general tactical messages are from the source to the destination directly. This means from the radio operator in the emergency operations center to the person in the field directly. Formal messaging is usually written when submitted and when delivered to the end recipient. Because of that, we have a strict form and formatting guideline that we need to follow with these messages. That is the ACS 213 form. On that form is going to be the detailed message and routing information to help us get that message to the end recipient. Formal messages take longer to prepare and send than informal messages do. However, they are much more likely to arrive unchanged at the other end than our tactical messages. So the radio operator may have to decide which type of messaging to use based on these requirements. So some basic messaging procedures. One very important rule is that they are always passed verbatim. Remember that we, as auxiliary communicators, are the communications circuit or conduit to get the message from one point to another point. We don't fix the message after it's been given to us. However, we can ask for clarification prior to sending if we believe that the message is confusing or that there's incorrect data on the message. The one thing we can add to the form is what's called operator notes, and these are additional notes that we can put on the message that are not part of the message content and therefore does not violate the message integrity. To make the message handling go smoothly, we use standard forms and pro words or phrases. This reduces the chance of errors by having a standardized form and agreed on pro words. It reduces the needed time to send a message because we can use these pro words as shortcuts, and it also increases the total message throughput by doing them without error, and by using pro words as shortcuts, the message goes through faster and we can get more messages through in a given amount of time. Also, if our communication is interrupted by some noise on the communication circuit or some other means, and we need to ask for corrections or make corrections, we have a standardized method for doing that that is efficient. Use of these pro words and phrases do require that the sender and the receiver agree on these pro words and phrases beforehand. There are some very standard ones that we use routinely in message handling, and we will go over those. The pro word or phrase is shown in red and the content after that in black. If you have something like EOC or MCP or ICS to pass in your message contact that isn't a word, and you're going to spell it out as just letters, we use the ProWord initials. So in the example here, I would say initials Echo Oscar Charlie. We always do those phonetically for clarity. If you have a list of numbers that you want to send, the ProWord before you do that would be figures. So in this example, figures 1, 2, 3. If you have a mixed group of numbers and letters, such as a license plate or other data, you would use the ProWord mixed group, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, 1, 2, 3. An amateur call sign is also a mixed group, but it's a little bit special because for our call signs we're expecting only one number. So to help validate that, we would use the ProWord amateur call before we transmitted the call sign if it's in the message content. In this example, amateur call Alpha Charlie 1 Echo Sierra. Names or words that need to be spelled because they're not easy to understand on the radio, we use the ProWord or the pro phrase I spell. In this example, Terry, I spell Tango, Echo, Romeo, Romeo, India. Any word that needs to be spelled for clarity, or generally names that are not common spelling, it's a good idea just to spell those up front so that the recipient doesn't have to call you back and ask you to spell those names. If you make an error in what you're reading off the message as you're sending it, and you need to make a correction, you back up to the last word that was correct, and then you start with the phrase, correction, I say again, and then you give the correct words. So in this case, I'm saying John was, and I realize I meant to say will, so it would be John was, correction, I say again, John will. It seems a little awkward, but once you do it for a while, you get into the routine of it, and it goes pretty smoothly. Roger is another common ProWord that is often confused. It simply means that I receive your transmission in full. It does not mean affirmative or yes. It does not mean I'm going to act on your transmission. It just means that I have received your message completely. Affirmative is the ProWord for yes. Negative is the ProWord for no. Break signals a break between the message parts or a reset. If we're passing this message through a repeater that has a timer on it, preventing us from keeping the microphone keyed for a certain amount of time, we'll break the message up into parts so that we can reset that timer on the repeater. It doesn't mean anything to the recipient except to stand by and wait for the next part of the message. If the recipient is unable to copy all the message, they can ask the sender to say again parts of the message that they need. This is generally done at the end of the message when the sender calls the recipient and says, "Did you receive my message?" If not, then the receiver would say, "Please say again all after words," or wherever the last thing they had accurately in their notes. Then the sender would say again all of that text after that so they can get the complete message. Okay, using the ICS 213. It's a not very easy form for us to do voice messaging with. It was never intended to be read over the radio. It was intended as an interoffice memo with a duplicate copy that could be handed around when you couldn't get a hold of someone on the radio. Unfortunately, it is the form we have to use to send and receive messages via radio, so we need to adapt a little bit to make that work to our advantage. It can be done quite well if the sender and receiver have the same form in front of them. Unfortunately, many agencies started varying from the standardized form to their own custom form and adding more fields, which made it very tough for it to be passed between agencies. So always stay with the original, just plain ICS 213 form. Practice and familiarity with it makes a very big difference in your ability to send and receive the message. Those fields come to you in a particular order: who it's to, their position; who it's from, their position. If you know that order and you're familiar with that, it gets very easy to send and receive with this form. Depending on the content that's in it, you may be able to use it as a tactical message initially. Let me give you an example. If this is a written message from someone in the ICS structure delivered to the radio operator asking for the water level at some location on the river because they're concerned about flooding, and we have a radio operator at that location, rather than read that entire ICS 213 message to the operator, it would be much more efficient to call the operator, ask him for the water level, write that number down on the ICS 213, and turn it back into the command staff. That way we've handled the message, we've gotten the answer, without all that extra overhead of who it's to and who it's from, because that doesn't make any difference to getting the job done. We've added an area called operator notes within the message body that allows us to track the message and handle it a little bit. Part of the problem with the ICS 213 is the lack of a message number and the lack of a place for count or word count to add up all the words that are in the message to make sure that you got the entire message. Imagine yourself as an auxiliary communicator in a radio center. You have sent 85 ICS 213 messages during your shift, and you have them all stacked up on your desk, and someone calls back on the radio and says, "We have an answer, there's 23 jugs of water here." You have no idea what message that was that you sent asking for the amount of water at that location. No message number to reference. So now you need to comb through all of your ICS 213s and look for a specific message where you were asking for the amount of water at some location, and hope that you only asked for that once and that they have the answer to that. Most of that problem can be fixed by having a message number associated with the ICS 213. That way the call can be made, "I have a reply for your message number 26. Now it's easy for me to confirm which message we're talking about and to find it in my stack of messages. So let's look at the ICS 213. This one is shortened a little bit. The reply section is minimal for clarity here. Generally, the fields will be in this format, although they may be laid out a little different in the header of the page. The form may look a little different, but these fields should always be there. Who the message is to, what their position is in the current structure, who it is from, and what their position is in the current structure. The subject line here will contain the subject of the message. The date field should be the month and day. We don't need to do year generally because this incident's going to be rather short term. And the time, which is always done in local time, military version, 24-hour time. Then we have the message content itself. In this one, the message is confirm type and number of backup weapons available at the MCP for use by federal authorities. Skipping over the operator notes for now, here's the signature of the sender and that person's position, which is fairly redundant because we have that already in the top one. Now the operator notes, I've signaled here in red and in parentheses. If I were sending this message and it were the 41st message of the day for me, or my shift, I would say this is my message number 41. I can count up the words in the message content here, and I come up with 16. So I put my message count in there as 16. Now, how does this sound over the radio? With practice, you can get this message across fairly quickly. The first thing I would do is call the person receiving the message and ask them if they are prepared to receive an ICS 213. If they are, I would say N7HQR, my message number 41 follows. To Raylan, I spell Romeo, Alpha, Yankee, Lima, Alpha, November. Givens, I spell Golf, India, Victor, Echo, November, Sierra. Operations Section Chief. From Art, I spell Alpha, Romeo, Tango. Mullen, Mike, Uniform, Lima, Lima, Echo, November. Incident Commander. Subject, Weapons Status. April 2/1, 1400 hours. Break. Confirm, type, I spell Tango, Yankee, Papa, Echo, and number of backup weapons available at the, I spell Tango Hotel Echo, initials Mike, Charlie, Papa, for, I spell Fox, Oscar, Romeo, use by federal authorities. Break. Signature, Art Mullen, Incident Commander. Operator's note, amateur call, November 7, Hotel Quebec Romeo, message number 41, count 16. End of message. And assuming that that was received correctly by the other person and their count, their message content adds up to 16 words, they would say, Roger, your message number 41, and we would move on to whatever was next. Thank you for your attention in this brief overview of messaging, and particularly using the ICS 213 forum for radio on-the-air messaging.